Chapter 11. Laguna Part 2. The rushing of water out of the broken dam in the distance was sort of hypnotic. Very pretty. This place was so far away from anything, though, that so few people would ever see it. Laguna smiled as he stepped in closer, getting a good look. Smiling, he lifted the map to get a better sense of where he even was in relation to that dam. "Kiros," Ward spoke up from the back of their three-man pack. "You sure this is the place?" "Positive," Kiros said quietly but confidently. "I don't want to be patrolling the wrong place, like last time." Ward crossed his arms. Laguna folded up his map and turned to them. He laughed sheepishly, wanting to get out of here. Sorry. This ain't the place." Kiros rolled his eyes at him. "This is it. Let's go, Commander." Laguna shook his head, tapping at his armor. "I brought the wrong map. This isn't it." Ward face-palmed as Kiros shook his head. "I'm the one who navigated," Kiros told Laguna calmly. "We're in the right spot. I haven't even looked at your map. Don't worry about it." "And why are you only just now realizing we're in the wrong spot?" Ward asked, raising an eyebrow at him with a grin. "Do you know how far we are from Galbadia?" Laguna let out a long breath. He had really hoped that would work. "Somehow, I have a bad feeling about this." "Really?" Kiros asked curiously. "Yeah, a bad feeling." Laguna shivered. "Seriously, I have a bad feeling." "So you've mentioned there's something fishy going on here. You know what the old folks say, the unfamiliar always happens." "You mean unexpected, don't you?" Kiros asked, one eyebrow raised. "You only got the un part right," Ward snickered. Shut up. Enough with your clamoring, and make sure all your gear's equipped. Now let's move out." He paused, blinking. Then, crying out, he grabbed for his skull. "Argh! My head's buzzing again." "Yours, too." Kiros frowned. Ward looked between them. "Okay, once is a coincidence. But twice." "I'm not thinking about it." Laguna shook his head, as though trying to dislodge the buzzing. "Laguna, don't you think we should try to?" "Not thinking about it," Laguna repeated, cutting Kiros off, running forward. "Yeah, that'll solve the problem," Ward said, cocking his eyebrow. They didn't hesitate to run after him. Even though, as he was running, Laguna was doing this weird crouch thing that made him run slower and more awkwardly. Kiros and Ward exchanged a look as the three of them took the dirt path down to the metal catwalk that led into the dam itself. It was there that Laguna stopped running. He paused in order to look at a conveyor belt that was shoveling what looked like tons of dirt up and out of the way. He tried to lean over the rail to see what they were digging from, but the bottom was too far to see. "Seriously, this place sure is strange," he frowned. "What the heck are these rocks for? You think these are natural rocks used for carving tombstones?" "Who know?" Kiros crossed his arms. "Or cares?" "Hey, speaking of strange," Ward looked at him, one eyebrow raising, "why have you been running around so strange?" "Strange? What do you mean strange?" Laguna looked suddenly guilty and uncomfortable. "Just being cautious. That's the basic rule of SP, huh? Hey. Laguna tilted his head to see a man in a vibrantly pale purple suit running towards them. The circular blade on his gun gleamed in the half-light as he jogged.
"Looks like we've got company,"
Laguna grinned, lifting his machine gun.
"They're soldiers. Still wearing those flashy, ugly uniforms. Seriously, why do they wear those? You know, if I were in charge, that would be the first thing to go."
Quiros, ignoring him, turned and jumped. Ward followed his gaze.
Laguna,"
he started wearily.
"Don't be such a weena,"
Laguna laughed, turning.
"It's just 1-0.
The 3 SDR soldiers that came up behind them were already cocking their guns. There were grins on their faces.
"Wasn't our mission just to patrol?"
Quiros asked, frowning.
"Why does it have to turn out like this?"
Ward sighed.
"Seriously?"
Laguna shook his head in disbelief.
"I wasn't expecting something like this at all."
Quiros sighed. Then struck so quickly the soldier whose chest he hit didn't see him coming. The scratch did nothing. It slid off of his enhanced suit like oil over water. Quiros's eyes widened as the soldier struck back with his blade. Quiros looked surprised at his own speed as he jumped back and out of the way. Ward pulled his harpoon from his back and slammed it down onto the catwalk. The strength of it dented the metal of the walkway and shook it, throwing the other soldiers off balance. As they started in on those 2, Laguna lifted his gun and let off a volley of shots. His eyes went wide as the bullets just bounced off of those flashy uniforms. Okay, so maybe they were better for something than just being ugly. Laguna flinched as the buzzing in his brain got somehow more intense. Then suddenly thoughts that didn't quite feel like his own were in his head. Circular blade-mounted shotgun, one of the earliest iterations of the gunblade. It operated more like a boomerang than a true gunblade. Its weakness was that it could easily be knocked off track. If he could hit it with the butt of his gun, he could attack more directly. Laguna barely had a moment to decipher his own thoughts before the soldier was aiming and firing. He ducked down to the ground then charged. The shotgun was single blast and he heard the shot spread behind him, clinking against the metal catwalk where he had been standing. The world blurred around him as he moved so fast he lost track of his own limbs. His finger twitched as he resisted the urge to shoot. There was no point. They bounced off. He just saw that. He needed to find a weak spot. The soldier fired again and Laguna dodged it easily. He was closer now. The Astherian soldier swung at him with his blade instead. Laguna lifted his gun and caught it against the metal body. The 2 of them grappled as he tried to get free and Laguna kept them locked together. At the other end of the walkway, Ward was trying to pierce through the strange armor of the SDR soldier directly in front of him. The tip of his harpoon just kept slipping off, like the uniform was completely impenetrable.
"URGH!"
he growled loudly in frustration. He swung his harpoon wide and slammed it against the soldier's side. The soldier flew sideways into the rail from the hit. But it didn't seem to do more than that. He wasn't winded or flinching. Their suits were absorbing the energy from the blows.
"Come on, seriously?"
Ward shook his head in disbelief. Quiros, just a few steps away, was alternating between the 2 he had been unlucky enough to be left with. His guitar were shining brightly as he danced between the soldiers. He was moving so fast he was surprised his own brain was keeping up with his movements. Blunt force was absorbed. Penetration didn't work. How did they defeat these soldiers? Let's try magic. The thought was so insane that Kiros actually wondered how it came from him. He had no ability to cast magic. Only SDR soldiers could use magic. That was what made them a superpower. Where had the thought even come from? Even as he was having those doubts, Kiros was moving out of the way, giving himself room. He couldn't even figure out what for until he was already lifting his shimmering blades. He felt a strange energy in his palms. One he didn't recognize yet still somehow knew how to use.
Thunder.
The bolt of lightning that burst forth from his body took his own breath away. It crashed from him and hit the unsuspecting soldiers square in the chests. They were the only ones capable of using magic. It didn't even occur to the suit maker to build in magic defenses. The lightning coursed through their bodies, making them twitch and spasm uncontrollably. Right to the edge. Right over and gone without a whisper.
Water.
Kiros looked up and over to see a blast of water hit Ward's opponent. It splashed against him. It soaked into his uniform. It caught inside of his helmet, drowning the man. He looked just past Ward to where Laguna was being thrown away from the soldier he was grappling against. He came up, growling.
Blizzard!
He roared, firing off his gun. Bullets bounced off. But spears of ice where the bullets struck erupted into the soldier's body. He cried out in momentary pain before he collapsed. The 3 Galbadian soldiers stood there, breathing hard and staring as the heat of battle started to fade away. As the buzzing in their heads softened once more.
Wah!
Ward looked at his own hands.
What was that? I'm not crazy, right?
Laguna looked over to them, then back to the gleaming ice crystals he had just shot out of his gun.
Did that just happen?
The 3 of them shared a long glance. Then, just to test, Ward threw out his hand again.
Water.
Nothing.
Hey.
He looked back at his palms.
That just happened, didn't it? We just cast magic. Didn't we? Oh. I got it.
Laguna beamed.
What if we're all secretly sorceresses?
Ward's face fell into his hands as Kiros shook his head, rolling his eyes to the ceiling.
What? Laguna,
Kiros looked at him.
Think about what you just said. First of all, men can't be sorceresses. That's just not possible. Secondly, how could all 3 of us be able to use magic without knowing it? That's statistically improbable to the point of being virtually impossible. It was just a theory, geez.
Laguna frowned as Ward looked up and past Kiros.
There's more coming.
Kiros turned as well and sighed.
There's no end to this. Let's just make a run for it. Think about this later.
Laguna pointed over his shoulder. Because the alternative was fighting more SDR soldiers, and why rely on a magic that they didn't even understand? They ran further down the catwalk and into the dam.
Hey!
Laguna smiled at the end of the catwalk. Not because it ended, but because it continued further down.
A ladder! Guys, it's a ladder. Looks like it leads down. Let's go.
There was really no other place to go. They went down the ladder. The metal walkway far down below led down towards a cave. There was still nowhere else to go. Laguna started forward.
What's with all this digging equipment?
Ward asked, looking around everything.
We shouldn't be in here in the first place,
Kiros sighed.
We were only meant to patrol. OOOU. Chapter.
Laguna ended his cry of pain with a hiss as he doubled over.
What's wrong?
Ward frowned.
My leg cramped up.
Laguna whimpered, trying to stroke down the pain. Kiros stared at him for a few seconds until Laguna let out a long breath and put his foot back down.
Phew. It's fine now.
He turned to see his friends staring at him. He laughed awkwardly.
I'm so out of shape. I really gotta stretch before I exercise. That last battle we had doesn't really count as exercise,
Ward frowned. It had really been over before it had gotten started. For reasons they didn't have time to decipher.
What?
Laguna looked distracted.
Do you say something? You know, Laguna,
Kiros frowned at him.
You've been acting oddly since we got here. What? I have not.
Laguna protested just a bit too loudly. Ward and Kiros both gave him long looks.
What?
He shrugged, still trying for innocent.
Keeping secrets, Laguna?
Ward asked, cocking an eyebrow.
Not cool. It's not me. So you are keeping secrets?
Kiros asked. Laguna flinched.
No, wait. That's not what I...
Ward crossed his arms and Kiros stared at him. They may have only been bonded because of the military they were forced into, but they were bound closer than brothers. And it was Laguna himself that had come up with the unwritten no secrets rule between them. Which he knew very well. He sagged a bit, guilty.
Okay. It was the general. He ordered me not to tell even you guys. And you listened.
Kiros raised an eyebrow.
They must have gone down here.
The three men looked up, frowning at the sound of Esthar soldiers.
Talk later. Run now.
Ward yelled. They all sprinted forward without hesitation. Up and around the bend. And into a strange crystalline cavern.
Whoa!
Laguna breathed as he slowed down, looking around. Yellow to green to light blue to darker blue. Yet dazzling. Also dazzling. Every sound echoed with a strange tinkling. It was hard to tell where the light was coming from. It seemed to be diffracting through the crystal. Or rather, coming from the crystal itself.
What are they doing down here?
Kiros breathed as they continued forward.
The general thinks they're looking for something,
Laguna said, whispering in the ambience.
He wanted me to find out what it was. Oh, so now you want to tell us?
Ward frowned.
Did you plan on breaking in here the entire time and not telling us?
Kiros frowned at him.
I didn't realize there would be Esthar soldiers. Esthar is the biggest superpower in the world and they're digging up something all the way out here in the middle of nowhere Centra, and you didn't think it would be guarded. I know. But I told you now, didn't I? Isn't that what they say? Better late than ever. Never.
Kiros snapped while Ward shook his head.
Ah.
Laguna grabbed for his leg.
Ow. It always hurts the most right before it stops.
Kiros frowned at the entrance to the caves.
Come on, let's get moving. Right. But... which way?
Laguna frowned, looking between two paths.
Just pick one,
Ward shrugged, leaning against a pile of metal. Laguna's eyes moved down and pointed.
Hey, look! A key.
Ward followed his gaze and frowned at the old key.
Yeah, so, what if it unlocks something?
Laguna laughed, bending down to pick it up.
Yeah, I'm such a genius. We'll take it with us. If it unlocks something important, why would they leave it in the scrap pile?
Kiros asked. He didn't receive an answer. Laguna was already laughing, running off down a random fork of the cavern system. Ward and Kiros followed after him dutifully. It didn't take long until Laguna stopped.
Wait. I feel a breeze on my butt. Thank you for that update,
Ward said dully.
No, seriously.
Laguna patted quickly at his pockets, then let out a cry of despair.
Ah! There's a hole in my pocket. And that key fell out. How did you not notice that sooner?
Kiros asked, crossing his arms. Laguna shrugged.
Whatever. How important could a key be if it was in a scrap heap anyway?
Kiros opened his mouth to say something, then changed his mind. It just wasn't worth it. He couldn't help but smile though, as he ran after Laguna. He didn't know what it was, couldn't imagine, but there was just something about Laguna that was so easy to like. The SDR soldiers were very unhappy that there was a trio of Galbadian spies in their dig site. They were chasing them quite determinedly. Laguna was lost, he had no idea where to go. He kept saying his sense of direction would lead them true, but they just seemed to keep moving through a series of crystal tunnels that led nowhere. Kiros could say that, at least, they weren't doubling back or moving in circles. The tunnels they passed were all different and new. At one point, Laguna ran over a series of hatches that squeaked under his boot.
Hey, I bet we can loosen these,
Laguna said, grinning brightly.
And when those soldiers come after us, they'll fall right through.
Kiros shook his head.
That will never work. Ah, you have no faith. Question,
Ward raised an eyebrow.
How are we supposed to get back if this is a dead end? Oh, it'll be fine.
Laguna was already laughing and leaning down to tamper with the lever holding the door up, creating a trap that might not work and simultaneously blocking their return. They never got to see if it worked. Halfway down another tunnel, Laguna found some explosives set to remove some boulders that were clogging up the caverns. Kiros and Ward both advised against it, he didn't listen and set both of them off. Kiros didn't know how good of spies they were, but they could certainly mess things up. All the while, Laguna kept determinedly moving forward. He seemed confident that he was just one more corner away from an exit from this place. Sunlight finally beckoned them forward. Real, honest-to-goodness sunlight. The three of them ran towards it like dying men after water. It was sunlight. It was the outside. It was the small edge of a very tall, rocky cliff overlooking what was likely equally rocky water. The only exit to this place being the single staircase they took up here. A staircase that they found blocked by an SDR soldier when they turned back around. He was glaring at them, his weapon leveled at their heads.
Don't tell me!
Laguna sighed, wishing he had somewhere to back up to.
Of all the worst possible?
Kiros shook his head.
Predicaments.
Ward finished, grinning at him sardonically. 2 more SDR soldiers came running up the staircase. Laguna could hear more down below. He lifted his machine gun, trying to figure out what to do. And that buzzing in his head got louder again. He groaned as it messed with his ability to think. Beside him, Kiros and Ward made similar expressions of discomfort.
What the hell is this?
Ward asked, trying to shake the sensation away. Laguna looked up to the skies.
Maybe it's a gift from the fairies. Fairies control the weather, not your head,
Kiros sighed.
But, I suppose it's a nice thought. Not a bad one to have before you die.
Laguna lifted his gun up and let out a volley of shots. The soldier on the left fell with ice spears penetrating his body. The middle and left guards dodged.
Well, good to know that still works,
Ward grinned.
Water.
Unlike last time, the magic answered his call immediately. One of the SDR soldiers slipped and skidded against the water right over the cliff side. The large splash he made against the rocky water below was ignored as Kiros ran forward. His guitar sparked as he got into a melee fight with the third guard. His blades couldn't cut through the uniform, but his magic penetrated easily.
That fairy gift idea is sound more likely by the second,
Ward grinned.
Let's hope that the fairies continue smiling on us for a long while.
2 more SDR soldiers ran up the stairs now to replace their fallen comrades.
Arg!
Laguna groaned, grabbing his stomach.
I'm getting hungry.
Ward laughed as he rushed into the melee himself. His harpoon was dripping now. When he lifted it and thrust it against his next opponent, the water drilled forward like a laser. The magic made everything so much easier. But the Estharians were catching on that these Galbadian soldiers weren't like normal. However they had done it, fairies or luck or hidden skill, it didn't matter at this moment. The next soldier to charge towards Laguna made sure he kept out of the path of his ice bullets. He threw his boomerang shotgun. Laguna cried out as his machine gun was knocked out of his hands. The strap kept it dangling from his chest, but he didn't have time now to fumble for it. He ducked back out of the way as the soldier ran into him. Both of their guns knocked out of the way, they had to resort to trading physical blows. Which Laguna was bad at. He didn't even like fighting. He used a gun because there was minimal amount of combat tactics needed for it, especially in comparison to blades. He was fairly certain he was going to lose this fight. All he needed though was just a second to get his gun in his hands. If he could just do that. The first blow he blocked easily. The second he dodged. The third he sidestepped. Then he threw his own and his fist moved so fast that he didn't even register it as his until his knuckles were suddenly sore from striking someone for the first time. The SDR soldier's uniform absorbed the force of the impact and prevented injury. However, the man still fell backwards. Laguna struck again. And again. His own eyes widened in surprise as he dropped low and kicked out his leg, taking the soldier out right at the knees. If he didn't know better, he would think that he had fight training of some kind beyond the standard recruit boot camp. He didn't even need his gun. He held out his bare palm.
Blizzard!
A large spire of ice pierced the earth, slicing through the SDR soldier. Laguna backed up, grabbing for his gun again as the spire shattered and the Estharian fell down, dead. Another immediately took his place.
What?
Laguna cried out in despair.
Laguna, there's too many.
Ward looked up from his most recent victory.
Ugh!
Laguna backed up, deflecting blows from the circular blade on the next soldier.
The tip of my nose itches.
His face contorted weirdly as he tried to relieve the sensation without actually lifting his hand to his face. It was such a useless, random thing to say. It wasn't that Laguna was unaware of the severity of their current situation. He was just a simple kind of guy. If they had to fight their way through this, then fight they would. Too late to do anything else.
Fire!
Kiros yelled, throwing a blaze towards the next soldier up the stairs. It stopped him before he got up. It did not stop the one behind him.
Ah!
Ward looked dismayed.
You have more than one spell. I suppose. I do,
Kiros grinned, wiggling his guitar at him.
Thunder!
Laguna threw out his hand. A blast of lightning sent his current enemy over the edge of the cliff, twitching and helpless.
Hey! I do, too. Ah, that's just not right.
Ward complained, spinning his harpoon to slam it into the face of his next upcoming opponent.
Come on, don't I have anything besides water?
The fallen soldier started drowning within his suit. He was replaced immediately.
Are we fighting the entire Estharian army?
Kiros asked, winded as he tried fighting the next man without using magic. It didn't work out well. He didn't last long before he was left with no choice but to hit him with a lethal dose of lightning.
Darn it!
Laguna cried out in dismay as he pointed his gun at the entrance of the stairs.
I wanna scratch the bottom of my feet.
His finger held down the trigger and the ice crystals that were his bullets started bursting through anyone who came up the stairs. The bottleneck they made was the only advantage they had. And as Ward took down his soldier, this was the closet thing they had to a reprieve.
Laguna, how much ammo do you have?
Kiros asked, worried.
Honestly, I have no idea. I can't imagine too much more.
Laguna was breathing hard as he gunned down anyone who poked their heads over the edge of the stairs. He got through 2 more soldiers before he heard the empty clicking from the barrel. He made a face as though they had been waiting for it. More Esthar soldiers charged up. One of them had a darker uniform than the others. Less flashy. He was pointing to the others. He was the leader in this situation. No one followed him up the stairs. Finally, an end in sight, Laguna let out a breath of air as he raised his bare hands. He really hoped he was able to pull off another adrenaline miracle. Use the gun. He kicked up the butt, reacting without thinking, using the metal to take the hit from the bladed shotgun. It was out of ammo, he realized in that same foreign part of his mind, but that didn't mean it wasn't useful. Now it was a handy metal, blunt instrument. And while clubs were the least elegant of weapons possible, it was still a few steps above his bare hands. This man was stronger than the standard soldier. While Kiros and Ward were using their newly acquired magic to fight, Laguna found himself in the unfortunate position of fighting armor that was, unfortunately, magic resistant. The thunder spell he sent to the man was only partially absorbed into his body. He twitched, but he didn't lose total control of himself. Laguna cried out in dismay as he came back at him. This soldier, Captain, was stronger, better than his subordinates. And Laguna was beginning to second-guess that voice in his head that knew what to do. And because he was starting to make mistakes. His own thoughts were getting in the way of the powerful buzzing and he was losing his edge over. Trying not to think, of course, only made everything worse.
Fall back, Laguna!
Kiros yelled. He obeyed without thinking and dropped back as Kiros took his place. One of his Qatar was spitting lightning, the other shooting fire. He was alternating between the two magics with each hit. He was also significantly faster than Laguna. He didn't try to think around his instincts. He let his training and the buzzing control his body beyond rational thought. Ward dropped the last Star soldier, which left them only with the captain, whose armor was shielded against physical and magical attacks. The three of them were tired. Laguna was out of ammo. They didn't know how long this magic was going to last.
"Taking over, Kiros!"
Ward yelled. Kiros fell back immediately and Ward took his place. His method of attack was so polar opposite of Kiros's that it took the captain by surprise for a moment. Kiros was speed. Ward was all brawn. His large harpoon bashed against the Star captain's body, forcing him to take steps back towards the stairs. Force was easy for the soldier to absorb though, and Ward's water spells weren't able to penetrate his armor to do any damage.
"Switch!"
Laguna jumped forward. The butt of his gun swung forward, slamming against the side of his head. A burst of ice struck at him, doing minimal damage. But still damage. Come on. There had to be a weakness here. There was no such thing as perfect armor. There was a weakness here somewhere. He just had to find it. Laguna, in his determination, finally stopped thinking. And that buzzing could better control his arms as he knocked the shotgun from the man's hands. He started heading towards his joints, his neck, the soft parts of his belly. Looking for somewhere, anywhere, that would transmit the force. His leg kicked out and slammed into the man's side. He knocked him away. Kiros attacked. Magic flashing from his weapons, slicing against him, sparking and burning through him. The man started crying out in pain. His cries only encouraged Kiros. His doubled his attack speed. He moved so fast that Laguna lost track of his limbs. The smell of burning fabric scented the air. The lightning was breaking through spots worn through the armor as the amount of magic thrown at him finally started overloading the suit's absorbance capacity. Until Kiros slammed his sparking Qatar forward and it finally burst through the armor. The captain made a wet, choking sound as Kiros's blade sliced through his heart. Breathing hard, Kiros jerked back his hand. The battle over, the buzzing faded as the captain fell to his knees. And as the buzzing faded, he realized suddenly that he was exhausted. He had never pushed his body that hard before. His muscles were burning with fatigue, his lungs crying out desperately for more air, and his heart was beating against his chest so hard it hurt. His hands, totally numb, lost control of his Qatar. He and his weapons hit the ground at the same time and he barely avoided hitting his head against the rock below him.
"Kiros!"
Laguna leaned down, reaching for his friend gently.
"You all right?" "That was surprising." "That was awesome."
Laguna laughed, throwing out his hands.
"I didn't know you could do that." "I can't,"
Kiros panted, sweating profusely now. His muscles were shaking, about to give out on him, and he wondered if you could die from overexertion.
"Maybe fairy help isn't a good thing after all." "Hey, we lived, right?"
Laguna touched his shoulder gently. He was feeling pretty tired himself as the buzzing drew back into his head. That buzzing saved their lives, but he was starting to agree with Kiros. They couldn't be all good if they didn't respect their human limitations. Ward stepped closer, smiling at his friends as he gently set his harpoon down. He imagined he was going to have to carry Kiros out of here. But that was fine. So long as they were both alive. Behind them, his blood bubbling up from the hole in his chest, the SDR captain reached out with weak hands towards his gun. Ward turned to check the stairs for more enemies as the captain drew back his arm. The blade was aimed at the defenseless Kiros.
No!
Ward jumped. His cry alerted Laguna and Kiros. The circular blade sliced through the air.
Ward!
Laguna leapt to his feet as blood splattered against the ground. The buzzing was back in full force. It had Laguna moving before he even realized what he was looking at. He jumped clear over Ward as his friend fell to the rocky ground. Laguna scooped up Ward's harpoon and lifted it over his head. Crying out in dismay, he brought it down with a roar of anger. The harpoon speared through the hole already in the uniform, through the rock below him, and pinned the captain in place like a bug. Laguna dropped down and looked to his friends. Kiros was reaching out with shaking hands to Ward, who was grabbing for his own throat. He was bleeding.
Ward!
Laguna moved over to him, towards the edge of the cliff where he had fallen. Kiros, the last burst of excitement draining on him, collapsed down. Laguna fell to his knees between his two friends. He looked with wide, panicked eyes at the amount of blood Ward was losing. Without even thinking about it, he grabbed onto the wound and started pressing down as the buzzing got louder for a moment.
Cure! Cure!
The green energy sank in slowly. The blood began clotting, the wound shutting. It wasn't healed, but it wasn't bleeding anymore. Laguna sat back, his hands covered in his friend's blood. But Ward was breathing. Kiros was too tired to move. They were both alive. All of them were alive. The sunlight glinted off of the water below and Laguna's eyes went wide.
Look, over there! Boats! We're saved! Lady Luck is on our side. We can steal one and escape back to Galbadia. One would say, we've been run out.
Kiros panted.
That's what they'd normally say. Who got run out? We won, didn't we? You call this winning?
Kiros tried to laugh, it just came out as breathy pants.
I don't think we're going to be able to live. To get back to Galbadia. Don't say that,
Laguna snapped, frowning at him.
It might come true. Didn't your grandmother ever tell you that? If you say something bad, it will come true.
He grinned wryly.
Yeah, I think she did. GGGHH? RHHH.
A strange, bubbling, gurgling sound came from Ward and Laguna looked over to him, frowning to see that he was looking at them rather strangely.
What did you say?
Laguna asked, not sure he wanted to hear.
His throat was injured.
Kiros looked over to him sadly.
I think he lost his voice. It. W.A. Fun. You.
Laguna frowned, leaning lower as a dreadful feeling settled in his gun.
Say again.
Ward's face screwed up in concentration and, as he spoke, his voice started getting threadier and less substantial. It was alarming to hear, coming from such a big man with normally such a deep voice.
It was fun. You guys. La Guna Key ROS.
It
was fun. Ward, that's way uncool,
Laguna said, breathing fast as he watched his friend's mouth close.
It's not cool to say things like that. Just for that, you're getting the coochie treatment.
Wanting desperately to hear his friend laugh, to prove to him that his voice was fine, Laguna reached out and tried tickling him. Ward was usually so ticklish right there on his sides. And as Laguna touched him, he breathed out like he might be laughing. But he made no sound.
How's that, hey?
Laguna asked, rearing back as sadness filled his voice.
Want more? Well.
Ward let out a long breath, and his mouth moved like he might be speaking. Only silence. Laguna dropped down onto his knees before him, breathing hard as he realized he might very well have just heard the last words his friend would ever speak. He had brought them to this place. He had lied about their mission here. Hot guilt filled his body as he realized that this was his fault. He had done this to his own friends. He shook his head quickly to banish those dark thoughts. Self-pity and hatred were not going to get them out of here. They were still deep in SDR territory. There could be more soldiers coming in and they were in no position to continue fighting.
Come on. We're getting on that boat.
Kiros looked over and grinned at the size of the boat in question.
A ship. They'd normally call it boat, ship, vessel, whatever. We're going back to Galbadia.
Reaching down, Laguna pulled up the exhausted Kiros. Before he could make a sound, Laguna walked him back, then ran him forward, throwing him off the ledge. Kiros heard the buzzing in his head just as his tired body turned in the air, so he hit feet first, probably saving his life. Then he just let himself relax and float. He was too tired to try to swim. Up on the cliff, Laguna had a little more difficulty lifting Ward's bulk. Still holding onto his neck to stop any further bleeding, Laguna threw him over as well. He looked over the edge as Ward made an enormous splash. It rocked Kiros waiting in the water but didn't send him under. After a second, Ward floated up as well. He looked around at the rocks at the base of the cliff, then back up at Laguna.
You guys sure have guts,
Laguna frowned, his stomach dropping looking down.
You know how high this cliff is?
No way he was jumping off that. He was going to climb down. Nice and slow. Then he could gather his friends, commandeer that boat/ship/vessel, and be on their way. He made it about 2 steps down. His foot hit a tiny ledge that was just not strong enough to bear the weight of a grown man. It shattered and Laguna slipped.
Oh,
he cried out wordlessly as he fell. He turned forward as the buzzing in his brain suddenly surged. He had to aim. He couldn't hit those rocks. Rocks that were coming right towards him. Squall jerked awake quickly, his heart beating fast like he really was about to land face first against the rocky base of a cliff. He had to remind himself firmly that it was just a dream as he pushed himself up to his feet. He saw Selfie sitting up, stretching, as Quistis pushed herself back up. The wide-eyed look of confusion must have been very similar to their first time. Zell, who had been pacing, stepped forward. Rinoa, standing just off of the path, remained quiet as she looked at Squall with eyes nearly as wide as Quistis's.
Was it Laguna again?
Zell asked immediately. Squall nodded. Quistis looked between the two of them as she got her emotions under control. They didn't seem all that surprised. And they said Laguna. Like the Laguna in her dream. She thought it was a dream. It had been so vivid.
Doesn't seem like the first time for you all,
she started, looking between them.
What was that?
Selphie was all too happy to explain. Zell had already talked Rinoa through it. Squall was patting at his clothes, trying to get the dirt from the path from the leather. Rinoa remained off to the side, still just watching silently.
I see,
Quistis murmured when Selphie finished.
That's very odd. What do you think it is? We'll just be wasting our time trying to figure it out.
Squall cut off any speculation before it could get started. He really rather wished he could honestly say it was just a dream. Since he couldn't, he would rather not discuss it in a forest where monsters could get at them.
Let's just keep going. Yeah, let's go.
Zell nodded.
We've got more important things to worry about right now.
Zell very nearly ran down the path towards Galbadia Garden. Selphie and Quistis followed more slowly, both of them still tired. Squall didn't get a chance to take a step because Rinoa had finally moved. She had stepped towards him, her eyes wide and unreadable.
Squall.
She started, hesitating guiltily. She didn't know how to describe how jarring it was to see him just pass out like that. The same Squall who had clung to a moving train, fought through broken ribs, and could freeze a heart with a look. To watch as his eyes rolled back, he cried out in pain, then just dropped had been terrifying for her. For just a second, too long of a second, she thought she had just watched him die. For an insane second after that, she thought that her yelling had given him an aneurysm and a stroke. And she had thought how horrible it would be if her last words to him had been said in anger.
I think I may have said too much,
she whispered, looking down.
I'm sorry.
Squall tossed back his hand. For a moment, she thought he had thrown her apology away. He was giving her that same look that he had when she had been yelling at him. Closed off, distant. It was easier to read now though. Forget it, he said without a word. He wasn't throwing her apology away. He was throwing away her need to be sorry. He held no grudge towards her. It was like water off of a chocobo's back. It just all rolled over him. Her lectures, and her guilt. He needed nor kept either one. She couldn't help herself, she smiled gently. It was so him. End of chapter.